Looking forward to the 2013 Amsterdam Marathon. We're right in the thick of the fall, the autumn, September, October, November series of marathons, and this is the old Olympic Stadium in Amsterdam, 1928 Olympics. So this is from where the Amsterdam Marathon starts and finishes. You can see the weather conditions there, at about 12 degrees centigrade. The conditions are pretty good, although that rather tells a picture. There is a fair amount of breeze out there, and that can be a great enemy to the road runners. Well, here we see a map of the course, and we are expecting a fast time, despite the fact there may be a bit of breeze out there. And certainly Jos Hermans, who is responsible for putting so many leading athletes on the roads these days, one of the most prominent agents in the athletics and road running game, he has maybe suggested that we might see something inside 2:05. It might be a little optimistic when you consider the conditions, but as always we have a powerful field of East African athletes representing particularly Kenya and Ethiopia. Well, this is Martin Gillingham alongside me, Xxxviii. And James, well, we've already seen some very fast times, haven't we, over the course of the last few weeks. Starting in Berlin, a world record there, and then another very fast time last weekend in Chicago.
Good morning, Martin. Yeah, it's been a phenomenal couple of weeks for marathon running. We talked in Berlin about the landscape changing in the marathon game, and we've seen that no longer is a 2:04 marathon clocking good enough to even win. Now you can run, as it was shown in Chicago, you can run inside 2 hours and 4 minutes now and not even win. So phenomenal times. Obviously Wilson Kipsang's world record was a phenomenal performance in Berlin, but really excited. I really enjoyed this race last year. The conditions weren't great in 2012, but the performances were. Course records by Wilson Chebet, who back in Kenya is now nicknamed Mr. Amsterdam, having made his debut here in 2010 when he finished runner-up to Xxxviii, who is here today, the fastest man in the field. And then since then he's been unbeatable here in Amsterdam, winning twice and taking that course record last year. And also in the female race there was also a course record in 2012. So lots to play for today. Hopefully, if conditions are favourable to the athletes, we could see some course records.
And as always, when we come to these major city marathons, we do have a series of pacemakers who will be out there to ensure a fast pace. Chebet certainly has been talking up his prospects. He's been saying that he's in line for a 2:04 clocking. He says that he's in better shape than last year, although recent form would suggest he's had one or two wobbles. That failure to finish the Rotterdam Marathon back in April, the most significant of those. But we do have the winners in the men's race of the last 4 Amsterdam Marathons here. James has already mentioned, of course, Chebet and Xxxviii, who is perhaps the course or the race favourite today, but also in the field, Gilbert Yegon of Kenya, who won this race back in 2009 and has got a best just outside 2:06. So they're outside the old Olympic Stadium. The pacemakers are away, and among the leading rank here of athletes will be the likes of Wilson Chebet, Xxxviii, Bernard Koech, who was very disappointing when he failed to finish that World Championship marathon, although we do see this time and again, don't we, when we come to the championship marathons, whether it's the Olympic Games or the World Championships, James, that whilst we are getting progressively faster times, there's quite a high attrition rate, isn't there, principally because of the conditions.
Yeah, absolutely. Bernard Koech, definitely one of the favourites today. He ran inside 2 hours and 5 in Dubai in January. Sandwiched some fantastic half marathons. He ran 58 minutes in San Diego and also won in Lisbon, but yeah, he'd be disappointed with his performance in Moscow. I would have thought he would have expected better. Yeah, going back to Gilbert Yegon, who won here in 2009 as a 19-year-old, taking 2 seconds from the great Haile Gebrselassie course record, but he's not improved that personal best since then. So, you know, he knows how to win here in Amsterdam. I think that's something that Wilson Chebet will be thinking about. As we talked about, his form's not great going into the race, but, you know, having had, you know, a debut here in 2010 when he finished second behind Felecki and then winning twice, he's been talking up those prospects of a hat-trick. And yeah, I think the pacemakers, there's 6 of them, and I think they're looking at around about 62:30 pace. I think the course organisers would love a time in the low 2:05 today.
Well, that's Jesper van der Vielen wearing 81. He's one of those pacemakers who's been asked to run 62:30, so if you simply do the mathematics, that takes you through in 2:05. But we'll see just how much that rain picks up. Big field here. Talking about as many as 40,000 all going through the start line here in the main stadium. Certainly with the chip technology which has come in athletics over the course of the last 10, 15, 20 years, it certainly makes it rather better for many of these athletes who will take 15 or 20 minutes to get across the start line. It means that they do get an authentic finish time when they come through.
It's unusual for a marathon to start and finish exactly in the same place. I mean, for them to start in the Olympic Stadium, I think it makes it slightly easier for some of the spectators, especially if it's a little bit of a damp, dreary day. Then obviously they can wave them off and in a couple of hours see them back in. But you know, a lot of tradition here, a lot of history. You know, great performances through the years. There's been some phenomenal runners that have taken to the streets of Amsterdam, and yeah, the masses really make it the atmosphere on the course as well, with the whole participation involved.
So the leading athletes will be through the first kilometre, and we'll catch up with those in a couple of moments' time. Wilson Chebet, that course record 2:05.41, although his lifetime best run in Rotterdam, that was in 2011. He's prepared for this race by running a 10-miler in the Netherlands. That was last month when he ran 46.26. So Chebet trying to convince us, and perhaps even himself, that he is back to his best form after that disappointing run in Rotterdam earlier in the year. It is remarkable when you look at this stadium here, which hosted the Olympic Games less than a century ago, just how much the big stadia of the world have moved on. And this, of course, a stadium which not that long ago was also hosting big football matches. So, up with the pacemakers. Here we can see Jesper van der Vielen on the left wearing 81. He's not wearing a number, but I rather suspect that's Khalid Chakoud on the right, or in the middle, wearing 84. That's Piers Kirop. So they are all pacemakers running in those sky blue shirts. Although over on the left you can see they're wearing 2. That is Gedu Felecki, who's now just slipped behind the athlete wearing 82, is another of the pacemakers, Daniel Salel. So any number, bib number there, prefixed by an 8 in the 80s, you can work on the basis that they are there to help with the pacemaking.
Yeah, they're going to have an important job today, the pacemakers, especially if it is a bit blustery out there. I think the thing that's blown me away in the last couple of weeks is the standard of pacemaking needed now to get them through in these phenomenal times. 62.5 minutes now needed today, but in the last couple of weeks we've seen in the region of 61.5 minutes, and it's getting that quality of pacemakers, and that's why there's 6 pacemakers today. I think just to ensure that you can maintain that pace in case one of them's having a bad day. And I think the other thing that we've seen is the number of athletes on fast times going right into 25-30k.
Well, this is the main stadium, the start and finish area for this 2013 Amsterdam Marathon. They've been going, well, just over 8 minutes, you can see there. This is the front of the men's field. Plenty of pacemakers. Essentially all the bib numbers prefixed by an 8 or even the odd 9, they are pacemakers. But the leading contenders all among this group, they're wearing the red vest. That's Dixon Chumba. And alongside him there, Wilson Chebet, wearing the bib there with 1. Chebet, as you were saying, James, Mr. Amsterdam is moniker back at home these days. He's such a course and distance specialist.
Yeah, he's made his race his own in the last couple of years. And yeah, we talked about maybe his form's not great going into this, but I think having the experience on the course, you know, knowing, you know, the undulations, knowing when to hold your effort back, I think that's going to play into his hands definitely today. And I think, you know, last year we saw, you know, a very fast second half. He put some good kilometre splits in the second half. They went through halfway in 63.06, so negative splits. But we also saw negative splits with Masafert Hailu's course record in the women's race, running 2:21.09. She passed the halfway in 71 minutes 15. The women are going to be hard pushed today, I think, to break the course record. I think Valentine Kikita is probably the favourite there. She's only 20 and she's got a personal best in the half of 68.21. But quite interestingly, there is an athlete out of retirement. It's Isabella Onchariu, who was the Olympic silver medalist back in Athens over 5,000 metres. But she's been out of the sport for a while, so making her marathon debut, it's a bit of a tough way to come in today. But I'd probably think that she might struggle in the distance.
So they're wearing 81 on the left-hand side. Jesper van der Velen, the Dutchman. Still a youngster, really, only just 22. But he charged with sending these athletes off on a pace of something like 62.5 minutes for the half marathon. One thing I think we should talk about, because there's been a few stories written over the course of the last few weeks, inevitably I suppose, about this sub-2 hour marathon. We've spoken about it before, and well, if you think about it, when you consider what the current world marathon record is, and even the time that was run by Geoffrey Mutai when he ran exceptionally fast on that course, which is deemed illegal, non-ratifiable by the IAAF, the Boston course, because of its point-to-point nature and also the drop in elevation. Well, we're still looking at incredibly fast times, around about 2:03, aren't we, and in the 2:3s. But people speculating inevitably, really, in anticipation of the debut over the full 42.2 kilometres of Mo Farah coming up in London in April. Speculation about the sub-2 hour marathon. Now, the expression lazy journalism springs to mind, because if we think about what 3 minutes or 3 minutes is worth on the road, I mean, that's a full kilometre. For people to even consider the possibility of Mo Farah, or indeed anyone else, running sub-2 hours at the moment, they've got to be running 1 kilometre faster than the best at the moment. Now, simply at the moment, and we don't want to place any barriers in front of us looking forward over the course of the next 100 years or so, because I suppose anything is possible, but for the foreseeable future, a 2-hour marathon, is that a pipe dream?
I don't think so. I think it's been great that it's got column inches in newspapers. I think the fact it's got people talking about marathon running has been a really positive thing. I think, you know, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks with, you know, 15 seconds knocked off that marathon world record. But as I talked about, you know, just before the commercial break, I think the thing that stood out for me is the number of athletes going through close to world record schedule at halfway, and even lasting to sort of 25, 30 kilometres. There's still been big packs there and races right to the wire. But we're seeing, you know, 2 hours and 3. What would be exciting would be to get those best marathon runners, and we're in a golden generation of marathon runners, and a lot of them are pure marathon runners now. I say that as in there used to be a progression from the track to the marathon. Now there tends to be, you know, these born marathon runners. You know, for example, it's Dennis Cometto, who won in Chicago, was never raced on the track. And he only started running.
Latecomer as well, isn't he?
Absolutely, Martin. He only started running 3 years ago. He was a farmer before that, and he's now winning Chicago, running 2 hours 3:45. So that's exciting. Now, if you got those guys together, you know, in one race, maybe in April. But I think the biggest problem, we're talking about knocking chunks off the time, is finding pacemakers that can actually go as far as we need. You're probably talking a pacemaker or 2, 3 pacemakers being able to go to 30, 32k, so they can step aside and leave them to go for the last, you know, 10 kilometres. I can see probably in the next few years them dipping inside 2 hours and 3, but as you're saying, we're talking about a full kilometre to go inside that 2 hours, and I don't think we'll see it in our lifetimes, but yeah, maybe in 100 years.
Yes, talking about Dennis Cometto, he was competing at quite a relatively low level about 3 years ago, wasn't he? And I think he had a chance meeting with Geoffrey Mutai, said, why didn't you join my training group? And Hey presto, the two were running shoulder to shoulder in Berlin last year, which was Kometo's debut. He ran the fastest ever debut marathon in Berlin, then went to Tokyo, which of course is now a world marathon major, in February, won that in a course record run, and then did the same in Chicago, setting a course record there last weekend. Now, he fell short of the world record, which is now held by Wilson Kipsang, but it goes to show more and more world-class marathon runners are being produced, and I guess at the heart of that is, frankly, commercialism, isn't it? There is more money to be earned by distance runners these days on the roads, running major city marathons, than running 10,000 metres on the track.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing that is changing is the paydays that are on offer at these marathons now. You know, the pay structure is changing with the phenomenal times that are coming out, but you know, we've also talked about the times that you need to run now in major city marathons and in races like this, which is an IAAF gold label road race, whereas maybe, you know, a few years back 2:06 would, you know, get you a course record, get you on the podium. Now we are talking about the 2:05s, and a lot of the marathons now, if you look at Kowicz's run from Dubai, you know, he was 5th, but he was 8 seconds off the win in Dubai. You know, that's probably the difference between, you know, making enough money for the next 3, 4, 5 years. But, yeah, I mean, even last year, the top European in this race was Michel Boutous, who just dipped inside 2 hours and 10 minutes, which is about the benchmark now for Europeans. But, you know, as I said, a few years back, that probably would have been a really good payday, how much it pays now. So it's definitely changing.
Yes, the major city marathons, they've become more robust commercial structures themselves, but I guess in terms of switching their time bonus structures, they've been rather forced to do that. If they were operating on the same time bonus structures they were a decade ago, I think many of these marathons would be out of business, wouldn't
they?
They'd
be bankrupt with the times we've had recently, and that's the first split coming up on the screen. Interesting. They're inside the course record pace by 10 seconds from last year. I do remember it being a bit of a stiff headwind last year for that first 3.1 miles, and yeah, so 14:52. That's decent pace at the moment, but yeah, the second 5 kilometre split in last year's race did pick up significantly in comparison to the first. So still a big pack there. The paces are doing a good job at the front, and I think yeah, there won't be too much racing going on at the moment in that main pack.
Let's try and identify some of the athletes in the race proper, shall we? Wearing 2 there, that is Gedu Felecki, who is perhaps the race favourite here. Just behind him, you can see they're wearing 31. That's Henry Kiplagat. Now, Kiplagat is one of the more interesting race debutants, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's someone that's run a low 60-minute half marathon, but that was, you know, in 2012, so not overly too much form going into this. But, you know, you've got to think that there's some, you know, stronger athletes there in there, so he's going to have to really have his work cut out to be, you know, be competitive.
So, more from the Amsterdam Marathon in a couple of moments' time. Almost 20 minutes on the clock. These are the elite athletes. Meanwhile, back in the main stadium, they're still streaming through the start line. Let's just talk a bit about the race weekend here, because we talk about 40,000 competitors, something like 15,000, I think, running in the marathon here. But there are 1 or 2 other events going on alongside, aren't there? Yeah,
the half marathon actually has a few more entries than the full marathon. So I think it's around about 18,000 in the half marathon, and then they also have a very popular 8-kilometre race here as well. So in all the races going on with the kids activities as well, you're talking over 42,000 you know, entries, and that's great. I mean, it gives everyone an opportunity. I wonder how many make the transition from the 8 kilometres to the half marathon to the full distance, but it gets people out. I think more importantly, you know, it makes a great atmosphere on the streets, and especially when they start and finish in that Olympic stadium.
And road running really thriving around Europe, and at this time of year, same really through the spring period. Normally 2 or 3 big city marathons going on almost simultaneously at weekends throughout Europe. And globally, we've seen 2 very fast ones already. The world record in Berlin at the end of September, and then last weekend, that very fast time run in Chicago. The New York City Marathon, that takes place on the first Sunday in November. And we go all the way through, really, to the end of the year. Honolulu Marathon, we've got Fukuoka in Japan, haven't we? That's in December. So, these athletes still going through the start line. 20 minutes later, they will get an authentic time though. Chip technology means that they can be clocked through the start line and then through the finish line. It wasn't like that a couple of decades ago.
Yeah, always blows your mind to think they're just coming over the start line in the elites. They're probably coming towards about the 8-kilometre mark. But that's the great thing with the mass participation, all shapes and sizes, lots of fancy dress as well. A lot of these guys obviously doing the 26.2 miles for charity, so loads of money raised for charity in most of these major city marathons now. As the pace is still healthy up front. As Martin said, our pacemaker's wearing 81, other than the pacer in the sky blue on the right-hand side. But they did a good job through 5 kilometres. I think, you know, what is staggering when you look back at the splits of Wilson Kipsang from Berlin, you know, just a few weeks back. I mean, you look at the split from today, and they went through 5 kilometres in 14:52. But Wilson Kipsang, we're talking 14:30s for 5K splits throughout. And yeah, when the splits came out, looking at it, 4:42 a mile for 26.2 miles. And so if you went down to your local track and you did one lap at that pace, you're talking around about 70 seconds a lap, Martin, for, let's say, 104 laps with no recovery. It really is pretty phenomenal.
Stunning stuff, isn't it? So, at the front of the field there, Jesper van der Velen alongside Khaled Chakoud. They are two of the pacemakers. A group of 6 are running in this lead pack here. Intention to go through halfway in something like 62.5 minutes. There you can see wearing 90. He's another of the pacemakers. Alfred Cherop, although he was originally only supposed to be running in a group at around about 67 minutes. 82, you can see there, Daniel Salel. He's another of the pacemakers. These are some of the athletes in the race proper. They're wearing 43. That's Abiba Gechwa. And 12, that is Dereje Tesfaye of Ethiopia, a 2:08 man. Struggling just a little bit. Looking further back down the road, they're wearing 14. That's Koen Raymakers, one of the leading Dutch athletes. 86, that's Tom Biggers of the Netherlands. He making his marathon debut.
Yeah, I think they were scheduled to go through in around about the 65, 66 mark. So some of those athletes that are dropping off the lead pack already, they've got a difficult decision to make. Either push on to try and get back on that lead pack, or maybe just settle down and wait for the second lot of paces to catch them. Remember, pretty much in the 80s, are the pacemakers. So this will be looking for the first of the Dutch athletes. As I said, last year, Michel Bouters running, you know, brilliantly to dip inside 2 hours and 10. And I think Raymakers is probably the favourite of the Dutch athletes today. And it's always good, isn't it, for, you know, the locals to have someone running well up front. You know, it really does add to the support as well, and Bouters definitely did that last year.
Worth making the point, though, that Raymakers, you would have thought when he gets through the finish, is going to be something like 1,500 metres or maybe 2 kilometres behind the winner. So, this is the sharp end. Still wearing 81, Van der Velen. 90 on the left, another of the pacemakers there, Alfred Cherop. Just behind him, 82, Daniel Salel. All 3 of those pacemakers, also at the front of the field there on the right, without the bib number. That is Khaled Chakoud, another pacemaker. 17, you can see towards the back there on the right, wearing the yellow vest. That is Vincent Yator of Kenya. He's got a best time outside 2:13. So he will need a marked improvement on that if he is to feature. Looking back here to the second group. 91, Roy Hohenweg. And 93, Stanley Siro. Those two pacemakers for the women's field. And we can see the leading women there already. F2, Alice Timberlil. 21, Guteni Shone of Ethiopia. Those two very prominent. And over you can just see on the left, Valentin Kipkeita out of the picture now, although you can also see F3, that's Mestawat Tufa. So these are the leading women.
And Katina Shkoni, it's her debut. She's a 68-minute half marathon runner as well. So Alice Tintiba, 2:25.03 personal best. The fastest, as we said, is Valentine Kipketer, just 20 years of age, running 2:24.33. And that's the other thing that has changed as well for me, is the age of marathon runners. Talked about Yegon earlier, who was won here in, you know, being 19 years of age. And that looks like Oncharu going through.
Yes, Achiri, Isabella Achiri, who's the athlete who's been away from the sport for 6 years after picking up that silver medal on the track in the Olympic Games back in 2004. And she's just running alongside Alice Timberlil. So, Isabella Achiri.
How hard do you think that is after a 7-year layoff?
It's interesting,
from racing and training, Martin, to come back?
It's going to be tough, I suppose. A lot depends on quite what you were doing in that 6 years.
You could say she was only 28 when she kind of took a step back for a, you know, for an Olympic silver medalist over 5,000 metres. The progression, you know, might have been then to move up to 10,000 and then onto the roads from there. So you would have thought the last few years she's probably missed a bit of a marketplace, you know. So to come back, I mean, she could be fresh, you know. It's almost like you know, the car being kept in the garage, and she could come out. But I just think that the whole mindset, and I think, you know, the training and the body, you know, I think it changes over that time. So it's very difficult, I think, to come back.
And this is also a vastly different discipline, isn't it? Running a marathon to running, you know, 5K or something on the track. It's a huge difference. At the front in the men's field, wearing that almost Royal Air Force blue, towards the right at the back, wearing two, Getu Felecki, one of the former winners here. And when Felecki won this race, that was back in 2010, he beat Wilson Chebet. Chebet there finishing second that time. Another woman we could just see there running amongst that group, F8, Mona Stockhecker of Germany. 2:36 athlete, there she is.
She could be the first of the Europeans going through in the women's race. Remember, a lot of these now looking at eyeing up European qualifying times for the marathon in Zurich next year. So we talked about the Dutch athletes. There's a few other Europeans in there. So yeah, they'll be looking at, you know, securing qualification for that, for the European Championships. There's still a large pack there as we cut back to our leaders. And that's athlete number 29, just struggling there, Denise Endris, the Ethiopian. Talked about the Ethiopians maybe not having the best couple of weeks in marathon running. It's definitely been a Kenyan-dominated fortnight. You know, even looking at Emmanuel Mutai, the always the bridesmaid at the moment, he called himself. He said he's sick of being the bridesmaid after running 2 hours and 3 and 52 seconds in Chicago. He says, I did everything right, but I still end up the bridesmaid.
Yes, he did win the London Marathon, didn't he? I think it was back in, what, 2011, I think? But he has got a whole string of second places to his name. But he, over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, you'd struggle to find a more consistent marathon performer than Emmanuel Mutai. He, time and again, he's been to London, finished in the top 4 or 5, I think 4 or 5 times. Won the race once.
Yeah, he does. His agent, Michel Botang, does a great job with him. I think they pick out the right races. Yeah, and he did win in London. I mean, we shouldn't forget that, but I think he seems to dwell on the fact that, you know, he is so consistent, but he does seem to end up runner-up. But there's so many good marathon runners out there at the moment, and it's not just one marathon runner that's beaten him. There's been, you know, a few different ones, but he seems to be one of the few athletes that can come back time and time again and perform on the big stage.
Doesn't have many bad races. There you can see a few hand signals coming from the pacemaker there, Khaled Chakoud. And all those numbers there, bibs prefixed with 8. They are there to ensure the pace is something like 62.5 minutes at halfway. Felecki moving to the front, the first time we've seen him running so prominently. 10 kilometres, 29:32.
That does leave them 5 seconds inside course record. So they were 10 seconds up at the 5 kilometre split. last year's course record they went through in 29:37. So they've been nice and consistent through that first 10 kilometres. So nice big pack there. Good work by the first lot of pacemakers. And they're keeping it nice and controlled, as we can see the second group passing the 10 kilometre split in around about 31 minutes. And as you see, there's not a big group in that second group. I think most of the athletes, we talked about some of them that were due to go out a little bit slower. I think that's the big temptation, isn't it, Martin, that they tend to feel so good in those early stages that it seems so easy for them to get the pace wrong in those first couple of kilometres. As we go to a commercial break, and we'll be back with the leaders after.
The leading athletes still running through the streets of Amsterdam, but it's a course that takes the athletes out into the country, and there's a long stretch when they go to the south, when they just run along the side of the river, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it takes them along the Amstel River. I mean, for a lot of these runners, that's ironically where they would have done the majority of their training. If you think about marathon running, you think about the chance to actually do a lot of repetitions and long runs actually on the road itself. You know, you're not really going to get too many opportunities to do that. So bike paths tend to be a lot of the places where you can get, you know, long flowing roads, mile splits, kilometre splits. So some of the athletes will, you know, won't mind the fact that it's quite quiet there. You know, they won't really be too bothered about the scenery, but you know, it's an opportunity for them to hit a bit of a rhythm. And I think that last year that was where they, you know, they really made time up on the course record.
And when you see the athletes running down that stretch, I mean, you can be forgiven for thinking this is not a major city marathon, because it really is a narrow stretch of road out in the country, no spectators, running on what looked to be almost like towpaths, don't they?
Yeah, I remember last year, it looks like they're out for a Sunday run, obviously with numbers on and, yeah, a few cheers here and there, but it does go quiet. As I said, I think the athletes are so used to that. I mean, they're putting in up to, you know, 150, 160 miles a week, you know, and a lot of that is, you know, there's no glory in that, so they'll be really used to it. And I think if they can just hit that rhythm, it just depends how open it is down there in terms of the wind. You know, obviously if the rain comes down like it might be scheduled to do, then obviously it's a little bit open down there. But, you know, they go back down the same direction, so if there is a slight wind down there, then they're going to get the wind on their backs. Again, last year it was down to, you know, the precision of the pacemakers, you know, the job that they can do towards that 20 kilometres, because it's, you know, just after the halfway from there. And then they get the feeling that they're heading back towards the city, and the race then really begins.
Well, this is focusing again on the leading Dutch athlete, Koen Reemakers, wearing 14, wearing that yellow vest, helped by a fellow Dutch athlete, Tom Viggers, who's his pacemaker. That's him at the front there, wearing the royal blue vest. But these athletes, something like, well, they're on schedule to run, I would have thought, about 5 or 6 minutes slower than the leading athletes down in front, so they're nothing like that sort of distance behind at the moment, something like a minute or 90 seconds adrift.
Yeah, I think Wiggers was due to go through the halfway in 65 minutes flat. I would have thought there'd have been a few more athletes in there, you know, in this group, but as I said, I think some of them have, you know, put their cards on the table and gone with that faster group, and we already saw, didn't we, after about 5 kilometres, there were athletes dropping off that. So, you know, remember last year with the big pack of runners, and Michel Bouters, you know, working his way through just outside that top 10. You know, whereas at the moment you'll see these athletes are, you know, well down in the 20s, 30s even. But there is that many casualties in the second half. Those athletes deciding to, you know, save their legs and their powder for another day, because, you know, the marathon is, you know, takes no prisoners, and, you know, if they're having a bad day and they're going to be outside what they need to achieve in terms of pay structures and you know, performance bonuses, then they might think about cutting their losses and finding another race in a few weeks' time.
Des Endres there, just struggling to stay on the back of the leading group. It really is not a time to find yourself cut off from the leading group here, because there will be quite a long gap back to the second group here. So he knows, in terms of putting in a good performance this morning, he will have to try and stay with this leading group for as long as he possibly can.
One athlete I haven't seen so far is Alistair Cragg, the Irishman, based in the US, was due to make his debut today with a 60-minute, 49-minute half marathon best, but you know, we've better known him on the track over the years, but I haven't seen him in either of those two groups unless he's caught in no man's land in between. So, you know, whether he is in that no man's land, that could be a long, lonely run for home.
Yes, Alistair Cragg, who's got a terrific record on the track, and he certainly is a world traveller, because you mentioned they're running for Ireland, based in the United States. I first saw him run as a sort of 14 or 15-year-old when he was running in the Transvaal Championships in South Africa, when he was a 1500-metre runner, originally from Johannesburg. But his international career took him to Ireland, and then, of course, over to the United States, where he had huge success. And the way he runs, perhaps he's making the move a bit late in his career, but he moves like a distance runner, doesn't he? Like a road runner. There was never a particularly high knee lift, but the fact he had plenty of success at shorter distances as a youngster does suggest, of course, that he does have fairly good leg speed as well.
Yeah, I often thought the same, that he would make a very good marathon runner. He's obviously run a phenomenally fast half marathon, but that doesn't always, you know, transfer into the marathon. You know, we talked about some of the athletes that have been, you know, great track runners and obviously moved up to the marathon. Obviously, we talked about the 2-hour marathon, and one man that was quoted or said he was misquoted was Mo Farah, who, you know, we saw a few weeks back in the Great North Half Marathon, and obviously, you know, phenomenally successful over the last couple of years with double gold at the Olympics and then double gold in Moscow. We're going to see him make his full marathon debut in April in London. So, so it's almost going to be that clash of the pure marathon runners versus the track athletes that have moved up to the marathon. So that's going to be really interesting come April.
Do you think that performance in the Great North Run rather tempered our expectations of Farah, because he has had the Midas touch, and there's a lot of people out there who just seem to assume that whenever he puts a pair of running shoes on, he's going to win and run incredibly fast. But we saw there that he is beatable. And do you think that in some respects that did help temper our own expectations of him?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but he got beaten by Kenny Beckley, who just happens to be the 5 and 10,000 metre world record holder. So, so he's no slouch. But I think it might be good for Mo going back into winter training. I think maybe if he'd have won there comfortably, not saying that he'd ever, you know, get in that bubble of it's all too easy, but maybe getting beaten, you know, in your last race of a long season. And, you know, knowing that he's got to step up the distance this year and train for the marathon. So it might be a good thing in his mindset every training run, you know, every time it starts to hurt and he backs off. But, I mean, you know, if you look at those last splits, you know, for the last mile in that Great North Run, you know, they were running, you know, 4 minutes and 10 or give or take for the last mile. So, again, that speed and that closing speed that he's got, he still couldn't quite get back to Beckley. But and it'll be super interesting when Beckley makes his debut in the marathon, what he can do. Because at one point in that Great North Half Marathon, he looked like he was dropping off the pace from the great Haile Gebrselassie and Mo, but didn't he come back well in the second half?
Yes, Alistair Cragg wearing 32, so you can keep our eyes out for him, but at the moment we haven't seen him at all. Certainly not in that leading group, neither is he in that second group. So this is right at the front of the field again. Khaled Chakoud now assuming the pace-making responsibilities on his own.
Well, Alfred Cherub there, number 90. Either he's got his maths wrong, he's been given different set of orders by the race organisers, due to go through in 67 minutes. So I think he's going through a little bit quicker than 67-minute pace at the moment.
Yes, alongside him as well, 84. That's Piers Cherub, or Kirop, I should say. For the athletes now who've been out of the city and starting to run on those stretches which do tend to look rather more like sort of canal towpaths, making their way along the river. The long stretch here, just following the banks of the Amstel River before there is another of those hairpin turns to get back onto the other bank.
And that's Wilson Chebet there, looking pretty relaxed, and also Bernard Courage. You know, obviously a super fast debut. Anyone that runs inside 2 hours and 5 minutes on their debut, that was in Dubai in January. As I said, it came a little bit unstuck in Moscow. But again, if you know, if you can run a 58-minute half marathon and if he gets it right today, he's going to be a major force come that second half.
Yes, Xxxviii really has had was experienced the highs and the lows of road running this year, hasn't he? With, as you say, with that very fast debut sub 2:05 in January in Dubai. Then he's run that San Diego half marathon 58:41. Now the course slightly downhill, so not ratified, but it remains the fastest half marathon of the year. That's incredibly quick, isn't it? 58:41. But then you look, obviously, at Moscow. It's a tough one for an athlete, isn't it? We, in terms of form, are quite happy to write it off as a one-off, one of these championship performances when athletes maybe fail to finish. But I guess there still might be some psychological damage.
Yeah, we've often seen it. The major championships tend to be different from the major city marathons. No pacemakers, often different temperatures. The major city marathons try and maximise the time of year for good conditions to maximise fast times. Whereas major championship marathons tend to be in the middle of summer, don't they? And it seems to be a different mindset. And I think sometimes when they're having a bad day, as I've talked of, that they might save themselves for a bigger payday in a major city coming up.
Well, that's Franklin Chepkwony, and he losing a few metres on the leading group. Vincent Yator having his troubles as well, just behind him. But that is the leading group, and you can just see the pacemaker, the early pacemaker, moving to the side of the road. So Khalid Chakoud looks like his time is done right at the front. Yes, that is Chakoud. Well, he was supposed to go through halfway in something like 62.5 minutes, but he's dropped off a good deal sooner than that. Just being passed there by Vincent Yator. That's Yator wearing the yellow vest. And further up on the road there, wearing 6, that is Franklin Chepkwony. 29, right at the back of that group there. Dessa Endris, who has now just about got himself onto the back of the group.
Surprised to see Chepkwony off the back. He's got a 2:hour 6:11 personal best. So, struggling. There's still a big group of 20 there. And with just 15 kilometres into the race to be dropping off that very early doors, this is going to be a long, lonely run. As that's looks like the 10-kilometre split coming back up again. So we're waiting for that 15-kilometre split. When they broke the course record last year, they went through in 44:34. So we'll wait to see. It looked as if they were there or thereabouts that when they came through. So which will give them somewhere in their projected time, definitely inside 2 hours and 6. So doing a good job so far. We've seen one of the pacemakers, or we've seen 2 of the pacemakers drop out already. But we have seen a couple of numbers up there that were maybe due to run slightly slower. So they could be making a shortfall in the pacemakers as they're diving for their bottles there. That's so important, especially early on, that they get their fuel on board. If you're talking about the wall in the marathon, that's about being able to maintain energy levels and therefore getting your water bottles and your energy drinks on in these early stages is so vital. As the 10-kilometre split, sorry, the 15-kilometre splits come up, 44:10. So they're now 24 seconds inside course record running. So it's picked up in that last 5 kilometres, Martin.
Yes, 2:05:41 is that course record set by Chebet when he won last year. Chebet, twice a winner here, of course. Once beaten, and when he was beaten, it was by Getu Felecki. And Felecki, certainly in terms of consistency, you would say maybe has a better record than Chebet. But it's been billed very much as a head-to-head between those two. Look out for Bernard Koech. If Koech is back to his best, if he has managed to put behind him the disappointment of that World Championship run in Moscow, then he will be a real threat here. But we've still got a large group at the front of the men's field here. A fair number of these still there in the role of pacemakers. And they include the athlete there wearing 82 on the outside. That is Daniel Salel. So the men's race through 15 kilometres. There is Felecki wearing 2. Just behind him, the athlete wearing 4. That's Abdullah Shami Dawit of Ethiopia. Just to give you some sort of idea the pace that they're running at here, talking in terms of course record, so maybe sub 2:05, when Patrick McCall broke the world record which he recently lost to Wilson Kipsang in Berlin, well, he went through 15 kilometres in something like 15 to 20 seconds faster than they did here. But bear in mind, Berlin, super fast course. I think something like now 6 of the fastest 8 times ever run in Berlin. And here we are in Amsterdam, which I think it would be fair to say in terms of its profile as a major city marathon, certainly one rung below, at least one rung below Berlin. But it goes to show, doesn't it, James, that almost every week at this time of year throughout Europe, 1 or 2 marathons of this quality, and they're going out and clocking times through the splits here, 10, 15 kilometres, 2:05, sub 2:05. It just goes to show in terms of the depth of quality in marathon running these days, whereas if we went back 2 or 3 decades, we were looking at 2:10, 2:12, 2:14. These days we're talking about 2:4, 2:5, 2:6.
Yeah, I mean, talked about the depth in packs at the likes of Berlin, Chicago, going through in 61.5 minutes or 61:50 as they were in Chicago. But you're talking 20, 30 athletes there. Cast an eye back to when Steve Jones went through in 61 minutes when I think he just missed the world record. I think he was, a couple of minutes clear of the field on his own. But now, as said, in a race like this in Amsterdam, you've got a pack of 20, 30 athletes there, and they're on sort of inside 2 hours and 5 pace, and there's still a large pack there, so it is that competitive, and I think that leads to the faster times. Obviously, we talked about safety in numbers before, where the longer they can stay as this strong pack together, again, the longer that the pacemakers can do the job at the front. Because, when the pacemakers do drop off, there will be some kind of racing going on. So it's so important that you get good pacemakers, and that's why, major city marathons now don't just employ one pacemaker like you sometimes see on the track. You're talking about 6 pacemakers, because so much can happen. Only takes one of your pacemakers to have a bad day or feel unwell, and if that's your one pacemaker, then your race and your fast times could be gone.
And also to talk about, this is Daniel Chavez da Silva, by the way, who has got a decent record around Europe. He'll be looking for a clocking just outside 2:10, or 2 hours 10, I should say, today. Talking about these pacemakers, if you want to be an effective pacemaker and you're running at the front of a field looking to run 2:05, you have to be capable yourself of running round about 60 minutes for a half marathon, because you're looking here not just to get through halfway in 62.5 minutes, but to do it comfortably, running at a set tempo.
Yeah, I think the art of pacemaking is nice, relaxed running. You don't want to be running behind someone that's seeming like they're sprinting and changing efforts. You want a nice controlled effort throughout the distance. And as you said, if you've got to cover the distance in today, they're asking for 62.5 minutes. So on that given day, they've got to be able to run at least 61 minutes, if not faster. Just because they've got to be at the front of the race, they've got to be controlling it. And I think that you want to be running behind someone that can gauge that, but they're not just going to halfway. We're talking about going past that to 25k, and ideally, for the really fast times, you're talking that 30k, being the golden number.
So wearing 4, Abdullah Shami Dawit of Ethiopia. Just noticed, by the way, that Franklin Chepkwony, who we saw getting detached at one point, has got himself onto the back of this leading group now. Don't know if that means that with 1 or 2 pacemakers at the front having changed, whether the tempo maybe has dropped a bit as well. We can see the pacemakers now wearing 90. That is Alfred Cherrup. He's a bit of a mystery man, as James was saying. Originally asked to run 67 minutes for the first half of the race. Well, I don't know whether he's done it unilaterally, but he's certainly converted himself now into one of the main pacemakers.
He must know the difference between 67 minutes and 62 minutes. Hopefully he's been given the call on the morning. Maybe one of the pacers wasn't feeling good.
You can certainly feel the difference, I think, between the two. 43, Abebe Gichu of Ethiopia. So the athletes running alongside the Amstel River. Not quite a towpath, of course, but a narrow road. And this, not the sort of image you tend to associate with big city marathons, but that's one of the features of the Amsterdam race. Out of the centre of the city, running down alongside the Amstel River. quite a long stretch actually. Halfway is on the way back, so they're going right to the bottom here. They will then cross the river, the hairpin turn effectively, down the other bank. They'll pass 20 kilometres, and then on the other side of the river they will also pass halfway. So they're very, very close to that bridge now.
And that second pack looks like it's gained a few extra runners there. As we can see, the Dutchman Rainmakers sat on the back, and it's still Tom Wiggers at the front there, doing a good job. Asked to go through in 65 minutes for the halfway mark, and he seems like he's doing that kind of tempo. And again, the longer the more athletes that form this second group, that it's going to really help Rainmakers, as he's got an aim of inside 2 hours and 10 to try and replicate the run last year of Michel Butters. As I make that lead pack, it's still around about 20 athletes there. Instead, a few making it back into that lead pack, but still, you know, there's no kind of racing going on so far.
Yes, there's almost too many people, I think, got themselves back onto the pace, and it does rather suggest that the tempo at the front has dropped. Endris is another of those. Endris wearing 29. There you can see wearing 6. Chip Quoney now running quite comfortably within the leading group, although he did get himself a little detached earlier.
Maybe, you know, it could have been the camera pan back to him, maybe he missed a drinks bottle station or something like that, or even stopped maybe for a quick pit stop or something like that. So, because he did seem to drop off, didn't he, quite quickly. And then, you know, when we got shot back to the lead pack, he did seem to make it back. So, you know, whether he had a problem there, whether he had a stitch, or whether it was a mechanical problem, he's back in the race. And, you know, having, you know, won a major marathon this year, you know, 2 hours and 6 a couple of times. So, you know, we were surprised to see him dropping off the pace so early.
Well, there is Faleki, looking very, very relaxed indeed, the Ethiopian. He has a faster lifetime best, Faleki, than Chebet. He ran 2:04.50 in Rotterdam last year. Only beaten, actually, in the sprint finish by Yamani Sege. So Faleki has a good major city marathon pedigree. Wearing 3 there, Bernard Koech. Yellow vest, there he is. Fast debut in Dubai at the start of the year. Disappointing in Moscow at the World Championships, though. In front of him, wearing 13, Shengo Kebede of Ethiopia. The Royal Air Force blue vest. Also there, Bantayehu Asefa in that leading group. He was 3rd last year. So across the bridge, left-hand turn. And not quite retracing their steps, but moving back in the same direction on the opposite bank.
Definitely a battle between Ethiopia and Kenya today. Trying to total up the numbers of each of those nationalities there. No love lost between the two nations as they try and stamp their authority on the marathon. Obviously, the great Haile Selassie having that world record for a while, but it seems to have gone back into Kenya's hands. And obviously today, Wilson Chebet trying to make it a hat-trick of wins, but it is Faleki, the Ethiopian, who's the only man to have beaten him here in Amsterdam. When Chebet made his debut here in 2010, it was Faleki that came up with the course record, and it was that course record that Chebet broke last year. So as we go back to the leading Dutchman, that's Rainmakers, and I think they're around about 3-4 minutes behind, so they're going to be round about spot on that 65-minute half marathon time. And we're only a few minutes away from getting a halfway split for our leaders.
Yes, certainly you can see right at the front there the blue vest of Tom Wiggers, stretching them a little bit, and that pace being set for 1 or 2 men in this field, including Rainmakers there.
And talking of half marathons, there's actually been a world record set this weekend over half marathon, but set on the treadmill by the Briton Andrew Lemoncello. So not run too many times, but it's quite interesting. I think he ran 67 minutes on a treadmill to break the marathon world record. But more importantly, raising some fantastic money for Down syndrome So good for him doing that, the Olympian base now out in Flagstaff. So talking about the 2-hour marathon, maybe it could be done on the treadmill, Martin.
I once saw Haile Gebrselassie running a sub 4-minute mile on a treadmill. So there is the compulsory win. Oh dear, concern here, and we thought he was just struggling a bit towards the back. This is the man who was expected to be the leading Dutchman. So Koen Raymakers, short of halfway, stepping off the road.
Seems to be favouring that left calf, doesn't he? The Dutch Olympian. And the problem is, if you get a problem like that going towards halfway, oh, bitterly disappointed. Look on his face. You've got to think all that hard work, all that preparation that's gone into it. And, you know, this, you know, one of their home marathons for the Dutch athletes. That, yeah, this is going to be hard to take for him. I think he gave it a go for a couple of minutes to try and run it off. But I think he knows experience enough that it's not something he can just run through, Martin.
Yes, and when those calves do just niggle and then tie up and cramp, there's just nothing you can do about it. And you know that if you keep on running through it, you simply are going to do yourself more and more damage. And calves are a problem that once you've got them, they're desperately difficult to get rid of. And certainly runners on the road tend to suffer from them a lot. Compartment syndrome, I know, is a real thing. That's when, in very, very simple terms, the calf muscles get almost too big for the sheath in which they're protected, and as you run, clearly there's more blood goes into those calf muscles. They therefore expand, and they end up almost being suffocated by the sheaths in which they operate, and tends to lead to lots of little minor tears, but the calf clearly the problem there for Raymakers.
Well, it's interesting, he's got compression socks on, you know, during the race, which might suggest that he's maybe had a problem in, you know, in the build-up. Not too many athletes tend to race in them. Obviously, remember the great Paula Radcliffe kind of making those her own when she was smashing world records, but don't see too many athletes racing in them nowadays. They're normally something used more kind of for recovery in between training and maybe some training sessions, but you know, maybe that kind of suggests that Raymakers went in here maybe with a slight niggle.
So the clock continues to run, even if I'm afraid Koen Raymakers doesn't. So we're back on the towpath on the other side. And it'll be interesting here because we'll be picking up halfway, and there it is, and we're just outside 2:05 pace at the moment. We'll wait for that to be confirmed, but it's somewhere at the moment, I would have thought 2:05.10, 2:05.20 pace, something like that. But it's very, very close to that record schedule, and so much now depends on the wind. Looking at the trees there, a little bit of breeze, not blowing too hard. There was a fear that it may be blowing very hard this morning. But the pace, the tempo, is a good one.
So as we welcome you back to the 38th edition here of the TCS Amsterdam Marathon, as you see the masses coming through, they're a few miles back behind the leading pack that we just saw go through that halfway mark, and they are on course record time. The course record set last year with negative splits. They went through halfway in 2012 in 63.06. Today they've gone through almost 30 seconds up in 62.38. So they don't need negative splits today. If they can run a second half of 63 minutes flat, then they could break that course record, or if Wilson Chebet could win the race for a third time, then they could be inside that course record of 2 hours, 5 and 41 seconds. So it's on, but we did also say we're not 100% sure on the direction of the wind. They could well have had a favourable wind for that first half, Martin.
That's right. It's not quite an out and back course, but there is certainly, in terms of the direction in which the athletes are running, essentially an element of that out and backness. But here we go, and they're on the towpath on the other side now of the Amstel River, and they are very well protected from whatever wind is blowing out there. Just losing a bit of ground, not for the first time. Franklin Chepkwony and it does maybe suggest that when he lost a bit of ground on the field, it was because the tempo out in front was a bit too quick, and now perhaps the tempo has been picked up again and he's beginning to struggle. They're wearing 31, Henry Kiplagat, making his marathon debut. Felecki, well, I wouldn't read too much into this because the, I say road, it's not even road, it's pathway in this part of the course. It's so narrow that you have to decide where you're going. But Felecki at the back of the leading group as well. You can see they're wearing 33. Just ahead of him, that's Mulu Andom of Eritrea. 3, Bernard Koech. There is Wilson Chebet wearing 1. Remember, we've got 3 previous winners in this field. Gilbert Yegon, the 2009 champion, wearing 7. Look out for him. Chebet, having won the race twice and finished second back in 2010 when he was beaten by Felecki. Shengo Kabedi just alongside him there, wearing 13. Kabedi, another of the Ethiopians in this leading group. There he is. Just behind him wearing 5, that's Dixon Jumba, the 2:05.48 man when he won the Eindhoven Marathon back in 2012. So another big race in the Netherlands. 10, that's Luca Conda.
Yeah, maybe it's Felecki just playing with the field here. As long as there's no gaps there. Could be if they're running with maybe a slight wind on their backs. Maybe he's gone to the back to get a little bit of benefit from the wind on himself. But they're on this quiet part of the course. We just saw some of the cows in the background were the only spectators for a small section of the race there. And we are starting to lose athletes from this lead pack. And you expect to see that. They are on course record pace. So they are the fastest, you know, kind of splits we've seen here in Amsterdam previously. So it's going to be very interesting through this next part. This is where the race really does start, especially when they hit that 25 kilometres, Martin. It's that next 10 kilometres that's really going to stretch them out.
Well, they're wearing 16. That's Mikhail Kulov. Just in front of him, Hugo van den Broek. And van den Broek appears to have been identified by the television director rather than the race director as the leading Dutch athlete now on the road following the departure of Koen Raymakers. So Hugo van den Broek, I would suggest we're going to be seeing quite a bit more of him over the course of the next hour or so. Looking further ahead, 19. That is Ronald Schreur. So Schreur, in fact, the leading Dutchman, just ahead there of Van den Broek.
A nice aerial shot there. Lots of activities going on. As we can see, you've got the runners going up one side of the what is the road, and then coming back on the towpath on the other side of the Amstel. So we can see the pace is definitely still quick at the front. There's still 2 pacemakers there, and there was last time we checked, and it's Kirop, number 84, and number 90, Cherop, were our 2 pacemakers. We obviously talked about Cherop originally being asked to pace the 67-minute group, but he's definitely doing a good job, and they did a great job. They were looking for 62.5, and they were 62.38. So that's pretty precise pacemaking when you're talking about running 13.1 miles. As I hope these guys in the water aren't doing 13.1 miles or even 26.2 miles, Martin.
Ronald Schreur, we saw there leading the race for the number 1 Dutchman in this field, just ahead of Hugo van den Broek. There is Bernard Koech wearing 3. And out in front, Alfred Cherop. Here you get some idea of just how quickly these athletes move. Certainly the television pictures by and large don't do the pace at which they run justice, because they really are clocking a fair old tempo.
Yeah, about 17 or 18 athletes still in that group. but you've got to think that a couple of them are pacemakers. So you can maybe call the race maybe 14, 15 athletes in there as are athletes that are going to be duking it out. I mean, if you look at last year's splits, it's quite interesting that settled to around about 15-minute pace from the halfway to 35 kilometres. But then there was a big injection in pace when they dropped to 14:19 from 35 to 40 kilometres. So whether that was a fast part of the race or whether it was a racing really happening, it's going to be very interesting. But they're definitely on course record pace at the moment, as there's some slightly larger gaps back to the first of our Dutch athletes out there, and that is number 19. Has already been identified as Ronald Scheurer. 2:16 best. So at the moment, it looks like he's travelling a little bit faster than that. Try and get an update on his splits. But again, he might have half an eye on that European Championships in the summer.
Well, there you can see the athletes on the way down over on the far side. And now the leading athletes who've been out in the country coming back towards the centre of the city. And that's a leading group of about 17 or 18. So it's still very competitive out in front. There is Wilson Chibet, twice the winner. Bernard Koech, one of the real threats here. Koech ran so fast, didn't win that race in Dubai, because not only do we get fast times in Dubai, but we get fast times in depth as well, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was 5th, but only 8 seconds off the win. I mean, that's a phenomenal debut inside 2 hours and 5. I think he was a former butcher before turning his hand to athletics and more successfully on the roads here. And the fastest man ever to run a half marathon in the US and win in Lisbon, which is always a very competitive half marathon, and again inside 60 minutes. But yeah, he'll be looking to get that disappointment from Moscow out of the way. But he looks fairly comfortable at the moment. He's not made any big moves or made any moves at the moment. So, yeah, definitely Koech is going to be someone to watch out for.
So Ronald Scheurer, the leading Dutchman in the field now, following the departure of Koen Raymakers. Hugo van den Broek, the second of the Dutchmen, was right about 25 or 30 metres down on the road on him. Just see him in the background there, actually. Looks to be a gap of about 30 or 40 metres.
Yeah, Van den Broek, who does have the faster personal best between the two, 2012, but he is 37 years of age now. So you wonder whether his better running or his better races might be behind him. But there'll be Dutch pride there, won't there? And they'll be wanting to be the first Dutchman home. So they got a race within a race there. So it looks like they're nicely secluded at the moment, the lead runners, as they're going to be heading towards that 25-kilometre split. Course record pace is 1 hour 14:40. So let's keep an eye if they've gone through it already or they're just there or thereabouts this 25k split.
Yes, and also I think it's a source, what will be a source of encouragement is the fact that we have 3 or 4 pacemakers up at the front, still in the field and not running for themselves, so they will ensure that the tempo is maintained.
And then the split has come up on the screen.
25 kilometres, 1:14:11 for Kirop, who is one of those pacemakers. But look at the number of athletes within striking distance of that. These all men in the leading group. They include Gilbert Yegon, wearing 7. So the 3 former winners all in this leading group at the moment. Talking about Gilbert Yegon, who won the race in 2009. Wilson Chibet, winner here in 2011 and 2012. And Getu Felecki, wearing 2. As you can see, Chibet there wearing 1, prominently towards the front. Well, it was Felecki who won the race in 2010 when he beat Chibet.
And that 25-kilometre split is definitely projecting them at times still in the low 2 hours and 5. So even that turn over the bridge and with the pace, and we suggested maybe the wind might be in their face in this section, but they've actually run one of the fastest 5-kilometre splits. So The race is well on at the moment, and there's a big pack there, and those three pacemakers might be doing a great job.
So the athletes now moving towards the final 10 kilometres of the race. We're in the heart of the autumn marathon series. We're in Amsterdam this morning. 10 kilometres remain in the Amsterdam Marathon. The winners of the last 4 runnings of this race, all in this leading group. The possibility of a course record. The record set by Wilson Chebet when he won the race 12 months ago in 2:05:41. Chebet wearing 1. And there you can see wearing 7. We haven't seen too much of him. Gilbert Yegon. He was the winner back in 2009. He's got a best just outside 2:06.
More phenomenally, he was only 19 when he won here, and I think it was his debut back then as well. So he hasn't actually run faster since, so maybe today's the day to step it back up. I talked about knowing and liking courses. He took 2 seconds that day off Haile Gebrselassie course record. And so I think we can see the pack's still very strong, and Chebet looks very relaxed there at the moment. It looks as if they're clipping these splits out, these mile and kilometre splits. As we can see, it looks like it's Shura going through 25 kilometres in 1 hour 19 and 32 seconds.
Gives you some sort of idea just how far they are down on the road. But that is the leader, or the leader in the domestic race, if you like. Ronald Shura.
Yeah, just over 5 minutes down on our leaders there. So if the leaders are projected a clocking of around about 2 hours and 5 minutes, just over. So if he can maintain the distance or the gap, then you've got to think that he might be heading towards a time projected somewhere, maybe, you know, the 2:14 mark, 2:12 mark, if he can pick the pace up. He's still got some pacemakers there with him and some athletes around him, so you know, he'll be looking for them to maintain that tempo with him. Athlete 38. I don't have him on my sheet in front of me. They seem to be doing a good job at the moment, and they'd be grateful for the company.
Well, probably about another 5Ks or so before the athletes start to pick up many spectators on the side of the road. But this is that leading group, 15 or so. But all the big names in there: Chebet, Felecki, Yegon. That list of previous winners. Oh, there you can see Felecki now has actually dropped quite dramatically. Well, this is the first real shock of the race. Felecki a couple of moments ago was right in the heart of that leading group, but now, well, he has slowed dramatically, and Felecki, who we thought was probably the race favourite here, the greatest threat to Wilson Chebet, he's got a terrific record of consistency. The winner of this race 3 years ago. The man who's been inside 2:05, well, he's now effectively out of the race.
Well, he's the fastest man on paper, and he'd be hugely disappointed. For these athletes, you know, to put in that amount of training, they're only going to get, you know, 2, or if they're lucky, 3 opportunities a year at the marathon, you know, to really maximise their payday, maximise that hard work. For Felecki, it's one day today that it's just not happened for him. So to dust himself off, I can't see him running at that pace all the way to the finish, can you, Martin? He's probably running to try and find a pickup station somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Ronald Shura, you can see there, leading the Dutch race. You can see Tom Viggers, who was the athlete who was out there helping the pace for Koen Raymakers, but his job really became obsolete once Raymakers stepped off the road over on the other side of the Amstel River. It's now Shura, who is running at a good deal slower a tempo than certainly Raymakers was earlier. So now Wilson Chebet will have noticed that his greatest threat here is out of the race. Just coming through there wearing 10, that's Luca Kanda. But still a big group, almost 15. Gilbert Yegon making bit of a move. That's him there in 5th place now. There is Yegon. Just behind him wearing 9. That's Abra Xxxviii, who finished second 12 months ago behind Wilson Jebet.
Kiprop Limo is the pacemaker out front. There's still two pacemakers in there. Alfred Chiprop, the other pacemaker. You might expect them to go to 30 kilometres and they will have done their job, their step aside. And that'll be job well done, and then it really will be down to racing. And Bernard Koech, for me, he looks very relaxed, very easy. He's got a nice, smooth, fluid style. And yeah, now the fastest man in that lead pack on personal best. And Xxxviii just a kilometre or so ago. So it really is now down to these athletes. But still no great racing really happening. Still safety in numbers as they head towards that 30-kilometre mark.
Yes, Bahano Gurma wearing 11, another athlete we haven't mentioned in that leading group. Looking very relaxed, so it's a group with plenty of Kenyans and Ethiopians in it. Now making their way towards the 30-kilometre point. With the next big split. They're almost right on cue is Bahano Gurma, wearing 11. Just behind him. That's 8, that's a Sefa. Number 42, Yebeka Bayabel of Ethiopia. He's got a lifetime best recorded of just outside 2:08, 2 hours 18. So it's certainly on a much faster tempo than that today. But Jebet wearing 1, there he is in the centre of your picture, looking very strong indeed. Back to Ronald Schur. And if he's not careful here, the leading Dutchman will be on his own. It's almost as if there he was gesticulating to somebody to say, hang on, tell these guys just to slow down a bit for me.
I think he's reminding them that they're there to help him, I think, if they are two pacemakers out there for the leading Dutchman out on the course. And is that another casualty from our lead group? I'm looking for the number there.
Yes, it's a Sefa. And he just beginning to lose a few metres on the pack. And in terms of his hopes, really, to win this race, that's pretty much fatal.
There's a 2:06 marathon runner, so they're dropping. And these are quality athletes dropping off the back here. As you can see, number 6, Franklin Chicroni again, dropping off. He seems to have dropped off 3 or 4 times, and as they pass the 29-kilometre mark. Each time he's made it back, but each time he would have made an effort to get back in the race. And I wonder whether this is one time too many as he lets the invisible elastic go. It's about getting on the back of that lead pack. But once it goes, it's very, very difficult to get back in the race.
As you're saying, I mean, it's happened time and again, hasn't it, Turn today? But partially, I suppose, aided by a drop in the tempo up front.
Yeah, I gave him the benefit of the doubt the first time with maybe a missed water stop or water station, but it's definitely not lack of concentration because he's done it a couple of times now, and I think it really is fatigue. And I think you're right. I think maybe the pace, you know, maybe changed slightly in different sections, and he managed to make his way back on. But there's athlete number 7 there, Gilbert Yegon, who's a former winner here. So we've lost one former winner, and it looks like we're losing another former winner out of this lead pack, Martin.
That's right. So Folecki, he's gone, and now Yegon about to join him. Well, it was a group of a dozen, but it's starting to splinter there. Certainly Yegon's gone. It's down now to probably 11. Look at 10, that's Luca Kanda. He's just hanging on at the back as well. There's Dixon Chumba, wearing 5, just behind him. Abdullah Shami Dawit, 33, Muli Andom of Eritrea. He's one of the marathon debutants here. But Wilson Chibet, who has really been talking up his prospects here, despite that disappointment in Rotterdam in April when he failed to finish. He says he's in the shape of his life, capable of running something around about 2:04, certainly between 2:04 and 2:05. He may well have to break his course record here just to win. 2:05.41 his time 12 months ago. So into something like the last 40 minutes of this Amsterdam Marathon.
I mean, it looks breezy out there, but, you know, compared to what it was predicted in the week, it wasn't looking too bright at all. It was looking extremely blustery, but I think the conditions have been pretty kind, and I think the splits have shown that. So I think the athletes, you know, through the week would have been looking at that forecast and been dreading it, as we can see the 30-kilometre mark coming up now. Course record pace. We're looking at inside 1.5 hours, and they are inside that, so they've maintained that pace, if not slightly picked it up, Martin.
Yes, it's a clocking. You would have thought the real possibility here that they will break 2:05. Wilson Chibet now showing prominently towards the front, and that's an indication that he's full of confidence. Bernard Koech is also there, but the group of 12 has become a group of 10, and now, well, it's been whittled down even more, and now there are 8 men on that shot. Right at the back, they're wearing 6. Franklin Chepkwony, well, he just won't go away, will he? Dixon Chumba, they're wearing 5. Abdullah Shami Dawit, 4. Wearing 11, Bahano Gurma. And there's some real problems there with the drink stations. And I tell you what, so late in the race, when you're into the last 10 kilometres, you could ill afford to lose 15 or 20 metres on men in front. But that's just what this man has done here. And Franklin Chepkwony, who's run a slightly eccentric race at times, dropping off the leading group. Well, he's done it again because he's had to wait for a drinks bottle.
Yeah, he wouldn't have wanted to have done that, having already dropped off a couple of times and made his way back into the race. As Kiprot Limo, who was our pacemaker through that last 30 kilometres, and 1 hour 29.12, so I make it 38 seconds inside course record pace. Obviously course record here is 2 hours 5.41, so that puts them there or thereabouts exactly on the 2 hour 5 mark. So we could be seeing history in the making here, could be seeing a course record, whether we can see the first man inside 2 hours and 5 on this Amsterdam course. Still a very healthy number of athletes in that lead pack, but with the pacemakers dropped off now, it's really going to take someone maybe to push the pace on, whether they start looking at each other and they really decide to race it.
So Ronald Schreuer, the leading Holland athlete, there he is. He's got some company alongside him. Wearing 38, that's Boaz Kipyego, the Kenyan. He making his first run ever over the 42.2 kilometres. But Schreuer, following the departure of Koen Raymakers, now wearing the mantle of the leading Dutch athlete in the field.
And that's Koech. So their last 5 kilometre split was 15:03. So if you're thinking metrically, it's around about 3 minutes a kilometre per kilometre. And they'll be doing that, you know, at a controlled pace for them. They'll be very used to running repetitions on the track, longer runs at this pace. As we can see, Citroni trying to make his way back again, having that almost comical drink stop then, and he's got back on now for the 3rd or 4th time.
Well, trying to make that leading group 1 of 8. It's been quite a 2013 though for Bernard Koech. That 2:04.53 on debut. At the time, the 4th fastest ever debut on a properly ratified IAAF marathon course. The disappointment coming in Moscow at the World Championships. Will have gone there with high hopes, but he failed to finish. But at the moment, well on his way to atonement in Amsterdam.
Also in that leading group, Abdullah Shamit Duet, 2:05.42 athletes. So some quality athletes there They know how to run fast times, but a lot of these now operating at under their personal bests. So that's also the unknown, is how they're going to be feeling, especially in the next 5 kilometres to around about 35k. They always used to say, or Steve Jones used to say, the race, it was a run and then the race started at 30 kilometres and that last 10k. I was just talking about this man, and now he seems to be the latest casualty from the lead pack.
Yes, he's dropped up to about 10 metres very swiftly indeed, hasn't he? So we're back in towards the centre of the city now, and it's a leading group of 8. At the front, Bernard Koech. Just behind him, Wilson Chebet. Also there you can see, well, he's back again, isn't he, Franklin Chepkwony? It would be a stunning story if he managed to go on and win this race when you consider how often he's fallen off the pace. Wearing 11, that is Bahano Gurma of Ethiopia.
In the red, Dixon Chumba looks good. Also on the left-hand side of our screen, wearing 5. But Bernard Koech, to me, has been used to winning, especially over half marathons this year. And as you said, a phenomenally fast marathon debut in Dubai. And that's interesting that he's not afraid to be pushing the pace. As Wilson Chebet there. To me, he's looked like he's been working harder than some of them, but it might be deceptive. He's still right in the race, and knowledge and knowing the course well might come into, you know, to play an extra hand for him as they come down towards what will be, you know, the last 10 kilometres.
Albert Gebret Sadik, runner-up last year. He's also in that leading group. That's Gebret Sadik wearing 9. Dixon Chumba, the red vest. So there you can see confirmation of that leading group now. It is down to 7 men. So let's go through them for you. Wearing 1, Wilson Chebet. Wearing 3, Bernard Koech. Dixon Chumba. 5, Franklin Chepkwony. Wearing 6, Abra Gebret Sadik, the Ethiopian. 9, his fellow countryman, Bahano Gurma, wearing 11. And Magesa Bacha, another Ethiopian, wearing 42. So further back down the field, this is Ronald Schroer, the leading Dutchman in the field at the moment.
Yeah, his position will be improving almost minute by minute as some of these from that lead pack step off. He won't know it, but he'll be heading back towards a much higher position. So I think we can see one of the paces there. I think that was Limo having done his job at 30 kilometres. And now it looks like his job's turned to chief cheerleader for these athletes coming through. His job's been well done today to bring them through exactly on 2 hours and 5 pace through that 30 kilometres. He's done a phenomenal job there. And the early pacemakers all played their part. As it's still Bernard Koech there. He's got that beautiful arm action. It almost looks like he is running on the track, but nice and strong as our leaders on the screen there. And it is down to six of them, I think I can count there, with some slight gaps coming back out. And we could have lost another athlete from that lead group again.
Yes, but it's, it is wearing 6, Franklin Chepkwony, although we've seen it time and again. He's dropped off the back. Also losing a bit of ground is Gurma. So there is Gurma, 11. Chepkwony there wearing 6. And he looks as if he's finally gone, I think. That is for the last time. So, beginning to splinter. We're losing some of these leading athletes. They are disappearing. So the group of 7 being whittled down. So the city of Amsterdam waiting to welcome a new champion, and it's going to happen in something like the next 26 minutes. Well, it's a group of 5, and we're starting to see a bit of a move at the front. Germer just slipping back a little bit, although it's only about 10 metres, wearing 9. That's Xxxviii, the runner-up last year. Bayabel wearing 42. And here he is, he's on his toes. And Bernard Koech, well, clearly in the sort of form which gave him that outstanding debut in January in Dubai when he broke 2:05. And 2:05 will be his target here. Chebet in second place. So it's Koech 1, Chebet 2. There's Dixon Chumba, not really responding to the moves up in front.
Chebet's working super hard to try and get back to Koech. Obviously, as we said earlier, nicknamed Mr. Amsterdam. Phenomenal debut here in 2010, and then twice winner. He won't want to give this up, having you know, made it his own the last couple of years, and he won't want to see someone win and break his course record. So he'll be trying to make his way back to Bernard Koech. And I think if this does come down to who knows the course better, but Koech does look like he's turned the corner from that performance in Moscow, and seems to be maintaining, if not slightly stretching out that lead.
Yes, the athlete wearing blue there, Yekeba Bayabel of Ethiopia, well, he came into this race with a lifetime best of just 2 hours 18:38, so he's something of the mystery man in this leading group. Doesn't have the most comfortable running action, the rolling shoulders, but he's doing a good job here and certainly on his way to a significant lifetime best. So something like 24.5 minutes remain in this race. Bernard Koech out in front, on his toes. Well, that advantage, 10 metres. If he can maybe double that, it starts to be a little bit significant. But Wilson Chebet, 2 times a winner here. The first suggestion, the first hint of pain on his face. But look at Bayabel behind him. Not the most comfortable running action. It's proving very effective indeed.
As you said, a late addition into the field, and he's not just come to make the numbers up, but he's been a major player here. We see Germer there, a slightly hunched style, doesn't look anywhere near as fluid as the athletes in front of him. But he's not given up the chase yet. There's a couple of metres back to Chebet in third place at the moment. And Koech slightly deceptive with this camera angle from the more aerial shot we had just now. It looked like he'd doubled his advantage, but with 2 of them in this lead group, whether they can, oh sorry, chase pack, whether they can work together, alternate certain sections, and by doing that they might get back to Koech. But Chebet for me looks slightly better than he did about 5 kilometres to go, 5 kilometres ago. But it is Bernard Koech who's looking out front. I would have thought they'd know from each kilometre split that they are right there on course record time, and for him, with a 2 hour 4:53 personal best, he's probably operating there and thereabouts, right on his personal best schedule.
Let's just tell you a bit about this Yekeba Bayabel. He's just 21, doesn't turn 22 until next month, but he's been in good form this year. He has run a 62.5 half marathon, but in the quality, the company that he's keeping here, that's pretty modest, really. He ran a race in Hamburg as well, where he went through 25 Ks in 1:14:51, and then 30 Ks in just inside 1.5 hours. But Bayabel certainly having the day of his life on the roads of Amsterdam. Chebet looking a little bit uncomfortable. Look at that. It's a real return, isn't it, from wearing 11 there, Bahano Germer. As Chebet begins to fade, back to 4th place now, and you are getting a sense that maybe, certainly in terms of targeting a victory here, Wilson Chebet, his race is pretty much run.
Germer seemed to put his head down, didn't he? Looked like he was rocking and rolling. It looked like it had gone, but he's found his way back in there. So waiting for that 30-kilometre split to come up. Obviously through 25 kilometres, right on pace there. So waiting for that 35-kilometre split to come up. As we can see, the first Dutch athletes out there, one on Schroer. It looks like, I wonder whether that is a pacemaker now or just another athlete there. Definitely lost one of the pacers that was with him. There's a slight gap back. He's trying to pull it back, but Bezabel is running a lot better, and Germer seems to have gone again.
Well, that's very strange, isn't it, really? He was looking so strong, and now he's got to a drink station, and look at the cadence has dropped entirely.
Well, Bayabel seems to have dropped off as well from Chebet. So Chebet seems to be the only one now with the two Ethiopians that seem to put in an effort. Definitely Germer, he put a massive effort in, looked at his watch and maybe decided that it was a little bit too far to maintain that tempo. Oh, it's another disaster at the water station.
Well, I simply cannot understand why athletes at this stage of the race stop, turn around, go backwards, cost themselves 40 or 50 metres. It simply is beyond explanation.
Well, there seemed like a huge grimace as well, because the last thing his body needs at that time of the race is a sudden turn, you know, to ask the muscles to suddenly work dynamically and literally turn your whole body round to go back on yourself to get your drinks. But at this stage, I mean, even they know how important it is, you know, at this stage to get their fluids on board, to get their own personalised drink on board. But you're right, they should know where the water stations are and the specialised drink stations, because you know it's like a motor racing car not knowing where their pit stops are. These are vital, and that could cost him the race now, at least a podium position.
He may need the drink, but I would have thought he certainly needs the 40 or 50 metres that he's lost rather more. And if you've been taking your drinks through to this stage, I would have thought you can do without it if you miss it. It really doesn't make any sense at all to stop, turn around, go backwards, because you're giving away your chance of victory. It's as simple as that. Absolutely.
It should be in their preparation, though. I mean, they put all the miles in. They should know exactly where all the drink stations are, and it should be programmed in, because, you know, that, you know, even costing yourself a couple of seconds, that hesitation. We've seen people trip up at drink stations. We've seen people dive, you know, over to get their drinks, and it ends up in injury. So the last thing they want to do is get an injury and miss their drink.
Well, while all that has been going on behind Bernard Koech hasn't really taken full advantage to get away, which does maybe suggest that Koech is not as full of running as maybe we might have thought, because Chebet, who I thought was battling just 5 minutes or so ago, if anything, is closing on Koech here. Now, this maybe means that the pace out in front, the tempo has dropped a little bit. The aspirations to run that course record of 2:05.41, maybe that slipped a little. Chebet, certainly not as relaxed as he was 10 minutes ago, but if anything, certainly holding that distance on Koech, and I think if anything, he's beginning to catch him now. And well, I was writing off his prospects as he slipped back to 4th place with other people going past him, but now he's in with a real chance here of completing a 3rd victory in the Amsterdam Marathon. What has Koech got left beneath the bonnet? He's got a lead of about 15 metres. He's only got something like 17 minutes to go. Can he get the job done?
I think they're well inside course record pace, and I think they're knocking on the door of 2 hours and 5 pace. Don't seem to have got an official 35-kilometre split through, but last year, course record pace, Chebet was just inside 1 hour 45 minutes. But that last 5-kilometre split and the pace that Koech seems to have injected, and you're right, Martin, that gap grew, and it grew a little bit larger, and now it seems to come back, and Germer's back in the race again, that hunched over style. And he's not given up the ghost yet on this race.
Well, it's amazing, isn't it? He gave the other two athletes 40 metres, something like that, to stop and go back and get that drink. You do wonder now, if he hadn't done that, he might be running alongside Xxxviii.
And the whole energy wasted in that as well. So, you know, it's not something that you want to do. And maybe a telling glance over his right shoulder there. It's always the telltale signs of a runner maybe looking or feeling more about the athletes behind or their position than looking up ahead of them. But he can see the two leaders in front, the two Kenyans there. Chebet and Xxxviii. We've got the two-time winner in second, and we've got Xxxviii, his first time in Amsterdam, just his his third marathon. So one phenomenal performance and one disappointing performance. But he's not giving up the race yet. Xxxviii's lead not overly extended, so this race is not done by any means yet.
Well, there you can see the speed averages that they've been moving at, and they're maintaining it pretty well. Wilson, Chebet.
So interesting, that 20 kilometres an hour speed they gave us for that 35-kilometre split means that they're inside or thereabouts 15-minute pace, and that would, as we said, put them well on, you know, schedule for the course record. And my calculations are right. If they can maintain this pace, then we're definitely going to see a course record. But we could also see the first man inside 2 hours and 5 on an Amsterdam course.
Well, look at this man again, Germa. He's had another resurgence. He's going to breeze past Chebet here. Well, could he yet be the story of the race? In the last 10 kilometres, having stopped, turn around, run back to pick up a drink, and then eventually found his running again. But now that he's gone on the shoulder of Chebet, he's dropped the cadence once more. He's certainly not running at anything like a consistent pace, is he? But now he's moving on again. Well, in his sights, Bernard Xxxviii. And Xxxviii, well, he must be starting to get a little concerned there. Be interesting to see just what he's got, because he's held that gap of something like 20 metres, but it's not really gone beyond it. And at this level, so late in a major city marathon, that sort of lead really is nothing.
Yeah, the Ethiopian Germa is definitely pulling that gap back. Said it's an ungainly running style. He's fairly stocky for a marathon runner, but he's showing good strength. And you're right, if he hadn't have had that mishap at the drink station, he would be right on the leader's shoulder now. But he seems to have got second, third, even fourth wind. Xxxviii is maintaining his pace. And Chebet, he's not giving up this Amsterdam marathon. He talks in the week of fast times, talks in the week of course record. He's obviously shown that he's in shape. He's got himself in shape again for this Amsterdam marathon. But whether he can make it a hat-trick of wins here, and in the position he's in at the moment, will mean that you know, if he was to maintain this, it'd be 4 Amsterdam marathons and 4 podium finishes. But he won't want to give this title up, and he won't want to go back to Kenya, being Mr. Amsterdam that only came third this year.
So Chebet, who has been the runner-up in this race before, that was in 2010 when it was Getu Faleki who won it, but Faleki, one of the first to drop off the leading group here. Still a lead of, what, something like 20 metres for Bernard Xxxviii. And now Germa has allowed Chebet to go past, and certainly from that angle, it suggests that that gap is closing all the time.
He looks good again, Chebet, doesn't he? He really did go past Germa there with a turn of speed. And there's always that part in the race, if you go past an athlete, do you go past gradually or do you really put the hammer down? And he's really got the bit between his teeth, and he can see Xxxviii. He's only probably about 10 metres in front of him, Martin, and that lead is definitely being closed down.
Yeah, so that's dropped dramatically, hasn't it? And that rather suggests that Xxxviii is feeling the pace out in front. Now, if Germa can use this as some sort of inspiration, we could have 3 men together very soon. So, a little more than 10 minutes to go. It's going to be a dramatic conclusion to the Amsterdam Marathon. Wilson Chebet looking for a third victory in the race. It would be a third straight win. And Bernard Koech now will sense that he's there. So Chebet and Koech are together. And we're inside the last 10 minutes or so. What has Germer got behind them? Now, what will Chebet do here? Will he try and really hurt him and kick on?
Well, hugely interesting that none of them went for a drink then, did they? None of them went for a gel. They just ran past it as if they didn't exist. The race was on, and especially with Koech having led probably the last 15, 20 minutes of running, that then he would be surprised to see Chebet catch him.
Well, it's two of the big guns going head-to-head at the conclusion of this Amsterdam Marathon. And Wilson Chebet, second in 2010, the winner in 2011, the winner again in 2012, has now opened up 10 metres on Bernard Koech. Koech, who only ran his first marathon run at the start of the year, he ran very, very fast indeed, having said that, sub 2:05, so he's got a faster lifetime best than Chebet. But Chebet, the man who knows these streets so well, is now kicking on, and it seemed as if his race was run not that long ago. But Koech simply hasn't been able to keep going, and this is the moment when Koech looked across and saw his great rival alongside him.
Chebet says he loves coming to Amsterdam. He's a bit of a local celebrity here. They really embrace him, and his cadence has changed in the last, 2 kilometres, especially when he got level with Koech. Again, it wasn't a case of running side by side for even a couple of minutes or a kilometre. He really did put the pace down, and he's moved away. And barring disaster, this will be a hat-trick of victories. And at one point, we did think his race was dead and buried, but the race has changed hands so many times today. There's been lots of positions jostling within the pack as well. But there's no doubt in Chebet. He ran his fastest split in last year's race between 35 and 40 kilometres. He ran in 14:19 seconds. So he knows how to run fast on this course, and maybe that's what he gears his training towards, and he's doing exactly the same today.
So the Fondle Park, and the athletes now inside the last 10 minutes of running. 3.2 kilometres remain. It's 3.2 kilometres between Wilson Chebet and a hat-trick of Amsterdam Marathon victories. And he's looking strong now, stronger than he has done for a while. And he really is kicking on. Bernard Koech has had no response. It would appear that Germer, the Ethiopian, who we thought for a while would be a major threat, well, he's now dropped back. So Ronald Schroer leading the race to be the first Dutchman across the finish line, looking strong, now running on his own. And towards the end of a marathon, these stretches where you do find yourself running uphill can really hurt. Well, for these ladies, it's the marathon all happening around them. Wilson Chebet, his lifetime best 2:05.27, ran that a couple of years ago in Rotterdam, and this certainly where Rotterdam is concerned, because this year was not such a happy hunting ground for Wilson Chebet, the great port city in the Netherlands. Well, Chebet failed to finish the marathon there, but returning to Amsterdam in the autumn, there's certainly more to his liking. Course record 2:05.41. That's the magic number to keep an eye on. 2:05.27, his lifetime best.
And that flag on top of that building giving us an indication that it is blustery out there. It seems as if it is slightly on the chest of the athletes now. especially for sure without his pacemaker now, without the group of athletes for comfort. Looks like he's got a battle around about 5 minutes behind he was at the 25 kilometre mark, so maybe that's extended, especially with the pace that Wilson Chebet is throwing down here. We're looking at 1 hour 59.18 at the 40 kilometre mark. Will be right on his schedule from last year. I think they've dropped outside slightly of the 2 hour 5 mark that they were on for, but they're still inside course record pace, or they were just a kilometre or so ago. And if anything, he looks like the pace has increased. As I think we can see in front, that is the 40 kilometre marker. And so we're looking at a time inside 1 hour 59.18. It's going to be well inside that by around about 30 seconds. So that last kilometre, that last mile or so, he's picked it back up again. So projected at the moment a time of around about 2 hours 5 and 15 seconds there or thereabouts. So he's on course maybe for a personal best. You said it's from Rotterdam, 2 hours 5:27. So we could be seeing him record a course record, a personal best, and more importantly, a hat-trick of victories here.
Yes, promising to be a very special day for Wilson Chebet. Hasn't always looked as if it would turn out this way, but when Bernard Koech went to the front, he was really on his toes and looking very strong, but having established a lead of 25 or 30 metres, well, he couldn't kick on and go on further, and that was a source of encouragement to the likes of Chebet, who must have hoped and thought that maybe Koech really wasn't feeling as good as he was looking. And Chebet now, the shoulders rolling a little bit, but inside the last 2 kilometres. And he will now recognise that this, the last 5 minutes of the race, the course record, 2:05.41, lifetime best, 14 seconds faster than that. Can he join the sub 2:05 club? That might be a little bit too much to ask, but that certainly, from his viewpoint, would be a major achievement.
So that's the official 40 kilometre split coming out on the screen, 1 hour 58.51. So well inside course record pace. He was moving at a phenomenal pace last year, so he's got to maintain this to finish it off for a course record. Obviously there's been lots of kind of sucker punches throughout the race, so he's going to be feeling it slightly. It does seem like his cadence has dropped slightly, and he is looking behind him, so hopefully he does know how close he is to the course record, or he's inside the course record, but more importantly, as any athlete will want, very close to a personal best.
Yes, just running along Amstelveensweg towards the old Olympic Stadium. And with each stride, the clock ticks on.
So this is one of the IAAF Road Race Gold label races in their programme, and they'll be scored upon the times that the athletes produce in this, that give them a kind of overall ranking. So the meet director, the race director, will want a course record, as Bernard Koech and Germer are fighting it out for second and third at the moment, but it looks like their races have run, as Koech has now dropped back to third. You've got to think he looked so good at one point and so relaxed. Maybe if he'd have just, you know, held his enthusiasm back and just held, you know, back with the pack, that he wouldn't be quite feeling it as bad as he is now.
Yes, well, Germer, who, well, I'd stop short of saying it's been an entirely sort of eccentric race on his part, but it's certainly not been one where he's run at a steady pace over the course of the last 5 or 10 kilometres. But at the moment, Behano Germer, who has a lifetime best of 2:08.11, is certainly going to smash that to smithereens. But up in front, it's all about Wilson Chebet. The clock ticking on towards 2:03. He really is anxious to get towards the finish. Ronald Truer on his own, as he has been now for a few kilometres.
And that's the leader back on our screen, Wilson Chebet. A few anxious looks behind him, but he don't think he could have seen anyone that close to him, but that probably shows how much he's feeling it, as he's only got sort of a couple of minutes left of running, and the history in the making here by becoming the third-time winner of the Amsterdam Marathon. And he could well be onto another payday by taking down his own course record. As I said, it didn't look certain during parts of this race as we got a great overall shot of the Olympic Stadium. The Olympics held here in 1928, where the marathon was won that day in 2 hours and 38 by a Frenchman, I believe.
Yes, how times have changed. Here he comes, Wilson Chebet. The clock ticks on towards 2 hours and 4. Can he somehow get inside 2:05? It's looking very unlikely, I'm afraid. The stadium up ahead of him. He will be thinking more in terms of that course record, 2:05.41 from last year. Certain now of a hat-trick of victories. That will be the major achievement for him. Bahano Germa appears to have won the race for second place. Wilson Chebet, the right-hand turn. There's the tower, there is the stadium. He just wants to get inside there and get across that finish line. Germa coming through for second place. And here he is. The clock going through 2 hours 5. It's not going to be sub 2 hours 5. And now really it's going to be desperately close for that course record. Inside the last 200 metres, it really is going to be desperately close. The personal best, that's not going to happen. But here he comes. 2:05.41 is the time he's looking for. He is just going to do it. It is a course record by, subject to confirmation, 6 seconds.
That's great running by Wilson Chebet to come back and to win this race 3 times. So to get your preparation right 3 times. Made his debut here, as we said, in 2010, where he finished second. Oh, I'd be absolutely delighted with that, and to take the course record down as well. As we see Germa, who, as we said, had an erratic race, but he'd be knocking 2 minutes off his personal best. There'll be people that will watch that race and think that he can go faster. I definitely think he can go faster if he can get his drink stations right and a little bit less erratic in the pacing. And I wonder whether Xxxviii has held on to that 3rd place. He deserves it. Yes, he has. Deserves it. He made the race in that second half. Really did ask the questions, and that makes up our podium as he finishes in just inside 2 hours 6.5 minutes. But no doubt in our winner, Martin.
So, 1st and 3rd for Kenya. An Ethiopian coming through in 2nd place. Xxxviii, partial atonement for that disappointing run in Moscow at the World Championships. But the winner, Wilson Chebet. A winner for the 3rd straight year and breaking the course record again. So a chance to reflect on that performance. It's, well, didn't always go entirely to plan, and certainly at one point looked as if he was going to be doing well to finish in the top 3, but 1 or 2 events ahead of him, and Bernard Xxxviii perhaps not as strong as we thought he might have been, but Chebet showing his ability to get the job done on roads that he knows so well.
Yeah, it was only about 10 kilometres out. He dropped to 4th place, didn't he, and wasn't looking like he was having a great day. Xxxviii looked like he was putting away, but yeah, that last 10 kilometres from Chebet, especially that last 5 kilometres. And maybe he's boxing clever by just knocking 5 seconds or so off that record time. He'll be already eyeing next year another chance to come back and maybe be the fourth-time winner of this race.
Abdullah Shami Dawit comes through in fourth place.
Just outside 2 hours and 8. So he paid the price in that last couple of kilometres. As we said, it's fairly rare for a major city marathon to finish on the track. It gives that feel of a championships where they come onto the track and run that last 200 metres. And I think that was something that Xxxviii really enjoyed today. As we can see the athletes coming in, again, they'll be looking to get inside various time bonus performances. These guys are looking like they're going to be inside 2 hours and 10. Because I think that's our leading Dutch runner. Yes, he is coming through with 2 kilometres to go, Martin.
Yes, there he is. Ronald Schroer. By the way, it was Gilbert Yegon we just saw coming through there, just about to enter the stadium, the 2009 winner. And just getting past there, Dessa Endres, who was with the leading group for quite a while. So Endres has lost an awful lot of ground, now being passed by Ronald Schroer.
Yeah,
a decent run this from
Endres paying for that early pace. Only a 2 hour 14 athlete, and he was operating a lot faster than that. Schroer would have been picking off runners as he went. As I said, his position would have been going up almost kilometre by kilometre, as some of our leading runners would have been dropping out. There's a great aerial shot.
So Yekeba Bayabel coming through. He's lost a lot of ground in the closing stages. He was very prominent relatively late on, breaking 2:10. That's a lifetime best for him, even so.
Well, at one point he looked like he might be a threat to winning the race. You know, he was someone, the late entry into the race, and he was closing in on our leader Koech, but he's paid the price massively in that last few kilometres.
That's Franklin Chepkwony. Just in front of him was Gilbert Yegon, the 2009 winner. So those athletes all through inside 2 hours and 10. And here comes Ronald Schroer, who is probably looking for a time somewhere around about 2:16, 2:17.
Yeah, I think that will probably book his place in the European Championships in Zurich. As I said, he gets the accolade of being the first Dutchman in the Amsterdam Marathon. But I think he's just struggled for bodies around him, hasn't he, in the last couple of kilometres. He looked fairly comfortable, and he looked like his pace increased when he had the 2 pacemakers with him. At one point he was calling them back, but he seems to have struggled the last couple of kilometres as they're still coming through. But there's some tired legs. We saw that lead pack. They were on record pace, and there was big numbers, weren't there? 17, 18 of them up until 25, 30 kilometres. And then it was dramatic how quickly each of them dropped off and how the lead changed hand, and we saw some of the runners up there, you know, even up until the later stages. But it was experience that really told today. Xxxviii, and a hat-trick of victories here. A second time he's taken down the course record. And as I said, I still think that there's a sub 2 hour 5 clocking on this course. And I think the organisers will be grateful and thankful that the weather turned out to be much better than predicted.
Yes, it looked rather like Gebre Sadik, last year's runner-up, just coming into the stadium there. So his clocking will be somewhere around about 2 hours 11 and a half. Meanwhile, Ronald Schroer, pain etched across his face. This last few minutes will feel as if it goes on for an age. So Schroer just moving over to the side of the road.
He's holding his side a second ago, which maybe indicates a stitch, Martin. Not something you want in the last kilometre or so of the marathon, especially if he's on for a personal best. Not too long of running in his legs. Looks like the cadence has dropped. He looks fairly tired out there, but hopefully this home support should see him through. (2:16.19) is his personal best, so he's got around about a kilometre to go, so he might struggle to get inside that. But you can still see a couple of athletes in front of him. but those look like very tired legs, unlike Chebet, who was flying through this section on his way to another course record.
And this is perhaps also running at this sort of time where it shows that the Amsterdam Marathon, the depth throughout the sort of 210s, 211s, 212s isn't there in the same way that you might expect at a London or a New York or a Chicago. He's still running pretty quickly here, but there's nobody at all around him who he can latch onto and help him. You can see there's one man ahead there, but he's essentially ploughing a lonely furrow.
Yeah, it's more the base probably in European distance running, isn't it, that there aren't the 211, 212 runners or the masses of them that there once were. And therefore, if you're running those kind of times and maybe a few minutes slower, then you have a fairly lonely journey for a lot of the races, and you might pick off a few of the athletes that go out too hard. But hopefully he enjoys this moment, and he's got his sights on 29, athlete 29 in front of him, Denise Endres, who is a 2:14 marathon runner himself on his day, but he went out at a much harder pace today, and he's definitely struggled in the second half.
So there is Ronald Truer. Endres ran about 10 metres ahead of him on the road. If you are just tuning in, we're watching the closing stages of the Amsterdam Marathon, where we've seen Wilson Chebet. We haven't yet got the confirmed winning time, but he has won his third straight Amsterdam Marathon, and for the second straight year, he's broken the course record. Stunning performance, dramatic race in the last 10 kilometres. We thought for a while that Bernard Koech was on his way to victory, but he was unable to build on the 30-metre lead that he had, and it was Chebet who, well, sensed his opportunity and took it with both hands. And this, the leading Dutch athlete, approaching the main stadium. There you can see just one right-hand turn, then onto the back straight, the turn onto the back straight, and the 200 metres to get him home. So he's looking for a clocking, I would have thought, somewhere in the high 2:16s. It's going to be something like that. So he's going to be very, very close indeed to his lifetime best, perhaps just outside it. 2:6:19 is best, the leading Dutchman here.
He's found second wind, hasn't he, in that last 200 metres. He's going to get a great reception as he enters the Olympic Stadium. He's got just over 200 metres, personal best 2:16:19. So it kind of suggests he's going to be maybe just outside that, Martin.
It's going to be 2:6:20s, I think, isn't it? He's just going to fall short, I reckon, is Ronald Truer. A good reason to be happy with himself. The first Dutchman across the finish line. The pacemaking really set up for Koen Raymakers, but he dropped out very early, running alongside the Amstel River. And Truer now, his lifetime best just passes. He gets alongside Endres, and they cross the line in 2:16:26. And I think that, well, the little extra effort telling there on the hamstrings of Ronald Truer. But he is the first Dutchman home in the Amsterdam Marathon.
I don't think his hamstrings like that last 50-metre sprint. Definitely both of them picked the pace up, and he really seemed to struggle at the end. But no struggling in that last 200 metres for our winner, Wilson Chebet. Fantastic performance. A hat-trick of victories in the 38th edition here of the Amsterdam Marathon. As I said, he'll be eyeing somewhere, maybe a faster time somewhere else. I can definitely see him running in the 2 hours and 4, and I'm sure he'll have half an eye on coming back next year and making it win number 4, Martin.
So the great challenge now for Wilson Chebet to take the form which he produces year in, year out at Amsterdam to other major city marathons around the world. Chebet wins the Amsterdam Marathon for the third straight year, and he breaks the course record as well. It's been a super performance from the Kenyan. From James Thie and myself, Martin Gillingham, bye-bye.